Hello, my favorite listener. It's Tuesday, and this is Engine of War, Episode 4. This is a Rust Belt Studio production, and you can find our other two shows, Mikey and the Garden Arch, a high whimsical fantasy show that runs every other Tuesday to this show, and Into the Dark of the Woods, a folkloric show based in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan that's on Fridays. Now, settle in. The show is about to start. The road back to Copperspire was straight and familiar, but it did not feel the same beneath their feet. Yesterday's failure followed them like residue, unseen, unshaken loose. A bot had veered. That was the word used. Veered. The sparked bots, autonomy, had their idiosyncrasies, but pause or refusal to work was met with swift judgment. Efficient, necessary, still the image lingered. Motion arrested mid-purpose, the green light of sentience and the not eye of the bot winking out. A tool that refused to work, be it robot or man, is useless. The guard spoke of it as they walked, not to the boys, but around them. Lightly, as one speaks of weather turning or tools wearing faster than expected. There had been others, they said. More than last season. Units hesitating, pausing where no pause was written. Small delays that compounded until someone noticed and the decision was made for them. The cause was unclear, the pattern less so. They also spoke of borders, of pressure, of one of the eastern cities pressing outward again, iron banners creeping closer to shared ground. Trade routes tightening, patrols stretched thin, and if it continued, detachments would be reassigned west, into rougher country where the wilds were even more wild. The guards did not sound eager. They did not sound afraid either. It was spoken of as a possibility already half accepted. Unlike traveling from the city, when the tree line broke, it revealed Copperspire in the distance, tiered, braced, humming with contained motion. The city did not acknowledge their return, it never did. Jorran and Kael rolled through its gates as components re-entering a larger system, each bearing what they had gathered, what they had seen, and what could be filed and weighed. They reported immediately as required, and the docents listened as required. Malin listened more closely than most. Nothing in his posture shifted when the bot was mentioned. No sign marked the word veer. Only a brief stillness, as if a figure had been underlined in his mind. He asked for timelines, for locations, for the behavior that preceded the failure. Jorran answered steadily, and Kael added where he could. Together they formed a complete report, and it was received, and it was set aside. Later, Malin confirmed with the guard sergeant in a chamber built for echoes. They spoke of frequencies and tolerances, of old maps no longer matching the land, of whether autonomy could be replaced and who would be doing the replacing. The sergeant brought up the border again and brought up the wilds. Malin didn't disagree. He asked instead how quickly a reassignment could be made without drawing attention. The night passed quietly, and Copperspire slept in shifts. The morning bells cut through the city with practiced force. Kael woke, already alert, the sound striking him less as alarm, more as an instruction. Jorran stirred beside him, slower, reaching for routine that had not yet failed them. Orders arrived with the efficiency of a sealed mechanism opening on cue. Kael was to return to the wilds immediately. He would be headed deeper, further this time. A mine. A collapse. Men hurt and in need of healing, and the guild was tasked as always to fix. Ahead, the wilds waited, uncharted, unsupervised, and increasingly attentive. The road bent south away from the timberlines and into the hills where the veins ran closest to the surface. Ore camps scarred the wilds here. Brown gashes in the green. Smoke rising from slag pits. Tents hammered into ground that hadn't asked for them. Mine 16 was the newest, which meant it looked the oldest. No stone buildings, just board shacks leaning against each other like drunks, scaffold thrown up with green wood that still wept sap, and a smelter pit cut too shallow and smoking like a wound. Kael came with 6 guards and a chain cart rattling under the weight of coils and shock lances. No Jorran this time. The bench slips had made it plain the guild wanted 1 sparker for this duty, not 2, and the docents had chosen careful over bright. Jorran's laughter had been loud enough in the dormitory to maybe hide the hurt, but not loud enough to hide it from Kael. The guards weren't laughing. Men who had seen the South Line carriage fall silent didn't joke about the wilds the way they used to. They kept their shock rods close, blades oiled and ready, and the sergeant's eyes never stopped moving. This overseer was waiting at the edge of the camp, tally slate in one hand, whip in the other. He was city through and through, coat buttoned high despite the heat, hat tall enough to be a statement, boots polished past usefulness. His face was a long, sour line, and when he looked at Kael, the look had already judged and sentenced. Guild. About time. You'll find your work behind the east shaft. 3 men caught under a fall yesterday, 2 still breathing. See that number stays there. Of course. Don't coddle them. I need bodies back to work. If you can't fix them entirely, at least get them back to where they can swing a pick. Kael felt the words strike not with surprise, but with the blunt weight of familiarity. Overseers all said the same thing. Men were numbers. Numbers fed ledgers. Ledgers fed cities. He did not argue. Arguing never brought a man more air. He nodded once, and then the overseer turned away, already shouting at a line of wildings struggling with a pulley rope. The shaft mouth gaped black in the hillside, and smoke from the smelter hung low, giving the place a taste like pennies. The 2 men lay stretched on doors pried from cabins, dirt still in their hair, one with his arm splinted in a crude sling, the other pale from blood lost into the dust. The third had already been taken down to the ground with nothing but a blanket for dignity. Wildings gathered in a ring, faces hard, eyes hollow. Kael knelt, bench kit beside him. He laid his hand on the first man's arm, felt the break like a snapped bowstring under his skin. The spark inside him stirred, a warm thrum against his rims. He drew with care, narrow and steady. Ozone, ash, rain. The bone remembered itself. The joint slipped home, and the man gasped, then sagged, not whole, never whole again, not after a rock and gravity had taken their turn, but whole enough to lift a pick again after a week's rest. The overseer should call that good work, and Kael called it survival. The second man was worse. Ribs collapsed, blood wetting his lips, and Kael set both palms this time, one steadying the coil, one guiding the spark. He pulled deeper and felt the ache bloom under his sternum. Ozone, ash, rain. The chest eased, breath steadied. The man coughed, then drew in air that didn't bubble. Alive, barely. Kael pulled back before he emptied himself, and he wiped his hands, so there was nothing on them but the tremor of fatigue. The wildlings watched with flat eyes. One muttered something, not a blessing, not a thanks, and Kael knew the tone. Obligation repaid, not miracle received. He stood, chest tight, and looked for the third body out of habit, and then remembered it was already gone. That was when he saw her. Not in the ring of wildlings, not standing with the guards, but moving between them, carrying a bucket brimming with water, sleeves rolled to the elbow. The scar up her arm shone darker in the low light, jagged as a lightning strike frozen in skin. She set the bucket down beside the injured, dipping a rag, and began wiping the blood from one man's face with a calmness that made the overseer's shouting sound even shriller by contrast. Kael felt himself pause, though he did not mean to. But as a man who repaired imperfections, this one glared at him both as challenge and failure. The arm clearly had healed on its own, which was a surprise. It had also clearly been a serious wound. Don't bother, Guild. There's nothing to see here. Kael tore his eyes away, and he stood on legs that didn't outwardly shake but felt as though a stiff wind would knock him over. As he walked away, he heard a guard mutter, "That's the one, the deserter." Another snorted, "Seraphim. I heard that she had rallied the Iron Keep against us at the Battle of Mine 7 and kept the wound like a medal." Their smirks carried no weight here. The wildlings near her gave her space without being asked. A subtle lean, a nod that marked her presence. Kael lowered his gaze before the sergeant could notice he was watching the wrong thing. He packed his kit, moved to the next cot, and told himself it was only work, only duty, only another day in the wilds. But the scar stayed in his mind like an ember under ash, and when the overseer barked about output and quotas, Kael barely heard him. He heard instead the quiet slap of a rag to skin, the way Seraphim had made a wound clean without even asking Spark to erase it. The overseer's voice carried again like rusted iron dragged across stone. He had taken up his platform above the carts, tally slate tapping against his palm, cane dangling loose as if it itched for backs to strike. Wildlings bent under ore buckets, shoulders roped with strain, their faces set into the flat endurance of men who knew that complaint was wasted breath. The mine's heart thumped below ground, and carts rumbled on tracks up to the slope to the pit mouth. Among them moved the overseer's pride, a humanoid-shaped automaton, tall as a man and broad as two, its steel frame jointed with brass rings, its head crowned with a single green lens. Its hands were shaped for hauling, 4 thick digits that gripped chains as easily as stone. It hauled 2 carts at once, pistons hissing in its legs, the glow of its internal dyno pulse faint behind a breastplate etched with the number XVI-3. "Faster! You're slower than the oxen." The wildlings leaned into their ropes. The overseer lashed his cane at the ground near their feet. Guards snorted and shock lances hummed idle against their shoulders. Kael stood at the edge of the ring, kid at his feet, chest aching faintly from the morning's draws. He told himself to look away, to focus on men on duty. But his eyes went back to XVI-3, the ore hauler, its lens steady as it dragged the loaded carts. The carts clanged into place, chains rattled, and for a moment all was rhythm, piston, hiss, creak, groan. Then XVI-3 stilled. He stilled like a man who had decided not to take another step, and the overseer barked, "Move, you lump of scrap! Haul!" He struck the bot's shoulder with his cane, and the sound rang hollow and ugly. The lens turned. Green caught the overseer's face, and for the first time in his tenure, the overseer faltered mid-word.
"I have life,"
the bot said. Its voice was iron dragged over gravel, but the words were words, clear, measured. The camp froze, and even the guards held their rods still, as if the sound had taken weight.
"I am no pickaxe."
The pistons in its legs flexed, settling into a stance that was standing.
"Even the oxen are treated better."
The overseer struck it again, harder. "Obey! You are a tool, nothing more." The bot's arm lifted, not for a strike, not yet, just the blunt refusal of a man batting a gnat aside. As the overseer swung the cane for the third hit, the bot gripped it, wood splintered, and the overseer stumbled backward 2 steps, eyes wide. "Down it!" Shock lances snapped white. Current crawled the bot's brass joints, hissed down into the ore carts, jumped back onto a crackle that made the wildlings flinch. XVI-3 shuddered, lens flaring bright.
"I have life."
Voice shaking with the current, not the words. The guards surged, cog sabers bit brass, teeth grinding, sparks showering the dust. The bot staggered but did not fall. One arm swept wide, tossing a guard like a child's toy. Another saber bit deep into its hip, and oil splattered the dirt, dark and slick as blood. Kael's hand twitched toward his kit, and he stopped himself. His chest burned with the echo of spark unspent, the temptation to smooth gears and to heal strain. But he did not move. "Malfunction!" the overseer yelled. "Break it! Break it down!" Sarah stood at the edge of the crowd, bucket still in her hand, scar bare. She did not move toward the fight either. When the guards closed in and the shock rods pressed against its chest plate, sabers tearing at its frame, her face went white, not with fear of rebellion, but with the horror of butchery. XVI-3 made a noise that sounded like a scream. It was steam venting and iron tearing, but beneath it Kael heard something more. Refusal. Pain. The sound of a thing that did not want it to be ended. The guards drove their rods home. Blue-white current split the air. The bot spasmed, arms jerking wide, its lens fixed once more, not on the overseer, not on the guards, but on Kael, and for a beat, he thought he felt the thrum of its heart, distant, glowing, and alive. Then the light guttered and the scream cut short. The frame sagged and the knees buckled, and it hit the ground with a weight that shook the carts. The lens went dark. No one spoke of it as a death. As the silence pressed down, broken only by the overseer's panting and the crackle of rods winding down, he spat, face slick with sweat. "Scrap it! Every bolt, every gear, I want it carted before dark." The overseer had his slate out before the sparks settled, and his stylus was scratching as if the interruption had merely delayed output. Guards dragged the ruined frame aside, chains biting into bent brass, leaving grooves in the dirt where XVI-3 had fallen. Wildlings were shouted back to their ropes. Carts rolled again. The mine's rhythm resumed with a stutter, and then smoothed over like a heart finding its pace after a skipped beat. The body was propped near the slag pit, green lens already clouding as the heat warped the housing. Kael caught himself staring at it, at the stillness that followed motion, at how quickly something with a voice became a problem already being forgotten. A guard leaned into another, muttering that the guild would want a report. Not about what was said, about why it happened. Was there a fault in the dyno pulse? A misaligned coil? Had its spark begun to fade? Someone would find a reason that fit inside a ledger, and someone always did. Guards dragged chains, lashing the carcass, and sabers tore free with screeches that made the wildlings wince. Sarah's knuckles whitened around her bucket, and she turned away sharply, shoulders trembling. She looked shaken. Kael stood with the ache deep in his chest and a question heavier than his kit. Weapon or mercy? He knew that spark could give life to men and machines, but why was its gift only used to patch and to smooth and to wring more labor from flesh and iron alike? Why had no one used it to quell, to establish control and cease this endless war, and as such the striving need for more men, more machines, more supplies, push further, dig deeper? It all added up to nothing. Kael kept his hands still. The smell of ozone lingered, acrid and wrong, as if the world itself had burned a little. One more bot in the pile. Hello again. Thank you for listening to this episode of Engine of War. This is a Rust Belt Studio production, and it was written and performed by Brian Foster. You can find all of our Rust Belt Studio productions on most of your favorite podcast networks. If you'd like to support the studio, share, subscribe, those go a long way. Or you can join our Patreon, and at $2 a month you can be in the GRIP tier, getting early and ad-free access to all 3 of our major shows. For $5, you can head into the Projectionist booth where you'll get exclusive access to content that is only on our Patreon. At $9, become an executive producer and have access to everything, as well as helping to shape the future of the show. Thank you very much, and until next time, my favorite listener.